Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Federica, part of the WeUni team, and we are now connected today with Royal College of Art. And it's a great pleasure to introduce you to our speakers for today. So today we're going to talk about AI and the creative world. So can AI be creative? And we're going to have this conversation with James Cope. He's head of program and professor of art and experimental media photography, and is a master of 1 year master available at Royal College of Art. And we also have the pleasure to have connected Gregor Petrovic is an alumni of Royal College of Art. So the idea for today is to give you an overview how basically the AI role, and also focusing on the ethics in contemporary art. So it is great that I can see lots of you already connected. Just wanted to make sure that everybody could join us before we start. So just use these few minutes. Unfortunately, we will not be able to see all of your faces. So just drop us a message into the chat. Let us know where you are connecting from. And of course, we are looking forward to receiving all of your questions. And we kindly ask you to write them into the Q&A box. Hi, we have already from Mexico. Hi and welcome. It might be lunchtime, Mumbai, Montreal, Nepal. It's great to see that we have students from all over the world. So as mentioned, we will be starting with the presentation. So we'll be leaving the floor first to the Professor James Coop and then to Gregor. And of course, then we're gonna open to all of your questions. So drop them at any time into the Q&A box, and we will be able to answer them at the end of the presentation. This is something that sometimes you ask. The session is recorded, so in case you miss some part or you'd like to rewatch it, we're gonna share with you after the webinar. So hi Hannah and welcome. I believe we actually ready to start. So for whoever just joined, welcome. We're just about to start our live webinar with Royal College of Art. So today we're going to talk about AI and the creative world. So can AI be creative? And we're going to have this discussion with a professor from Royal College of Art and one of the alumni. So James, thanks so much for being with us today. I leave you the floor for the first part of the presentation. And of course, I look forward to receiving all the questions from the attendees.
Great. Thanks, Federica. And hello, everybody. Glad to see so many of you here. So the plan is for me to begin with a few comments, provocations. Then I'll hand over to Gregor to share some of his work. And then after that, we should have plenty of time for Q&A. So when we think about the role of artificial intelligence in society today, we can probably all agree that AI promises to transform almost every aspect of human life in the 21st century. We're all impacted by it, whether we like it or not. So that's to say that the transformations that AI promise come at a cost. So we find ourselves with a sort of dichotomy, a bargain to make with AI. On the one hand, it's drastically accelerating our abilities to generate and model solutions for things like healthcare, pollution, automation, and so on. And at the RCA, we see important work in those areas happening in places like our Computer Science Research Center, Robotics Lab, Intelligent Mobility Design Center, and so on. But at the same time, AI's potential impact is often framed as a threat, and a threat to things such as labor. So human work, the kinds of jobs that we used to do, maybe being taken over by AI, the threat of human obsolescence. We might think about the impact of AI on civil rights. So things like data scraping, facial recognition, language modeling, bias, discrimination, predictive policing, false arrests, that kind of thing. Intellectual property is being impacted as large data sets used to train AI models are scraping, often without consent, images and data from people, including artists. We can think of the impact of AI on truth via deepfakes and other algorithmically generated bits and pieces of information and news and so on. Think about the impact on the environment, the climate impact of the amount of energy that it takes to actually create and run AI models. And then also perhaps critically to creativity itself. What is the impact of AI on creativity? We think about things like authorship and consent, AI beginning to write stuff, screenplays, films, to generate videos, to generate art. So, what does all this mean at the RCA? Perhaps our guiding premise that we would follow is to assert that artists have a crucial and central role to play in exploring the social and the ethical, ecological, political problems raised by AI. Artists working with AI are often operating at the intersection of all of those things, but is the work any good? Do artists have the right skills and the right tools for the job? I'll quote from a recent Guardian article by Amelia Tate, in which she said, as the technology becomes more prominent in our everyday lives, artists' use of AI risks feeling trite. So that's to say, it's not enough to simply be an artist who uses AI. We have to have something to say with it too. Are artists finding enough ways to critique rather than simply endorse these technologies? Do artists have the right resources to be anything more than consumers of AI technology in the face of an industry that's accelerating at an exponential rate and using materials that are financially out of reach for most people, and that includes artists? So one thing for us at RCA to consider as an institution, as an art school that wants to produce students capable of making significant, ideally non-trite work that explores these issues, how do we ensure that our students have access to the right resources, the right expertise, the right methods, not just in terms of technology, but also from a conceptual and a critical point of view? Otherwise, we are going to risk leaving artists behind, diminishing the important role that they play in holding to account corporate, commercial, and governmental applications of AI. So access to AI should not be limited to those artists with sufficient capital or corporate sponsorship who can hire large teams of programmers and buy expensive servers. There have been a good recent number of large-scale, expensive AI exhibitions around London, for instance, which in some cases, to give you another quote, have been accused of being derivative and familiar. The critics have said struggle to transcend their source material and are already months behind the curve. And of course, that's assuming that in the first place, it even works. If you're an artist and you tried it, putting together a work of AI, if you've tried exhibiting it, there are huge challenges involved. Most museums and galleries don't have the physical infrastructure or the technical expertise to exhibit that kind of work. So all that's to say that perhaps the real threat posed by AI to contemporary art is actually the specter of bad art, art that uses AI but doesn't hold it to account. And arguably, this is more of a problem than the demotion or the elimination of the individual artist. So by contributing to a proliferation of trite or innocuous art, AI risks rendering art itself as an irrelevant, pointless enterprise, or worse, as some kind of anodyne decoration. So from an artist's point of view, much is at stake. And at the RCA, you'll find a broad range of research and academic programs that operate across the AI spectrum. I could speak specifically to my own angle of approach. In photography, we have a group of students working with synthetic media, generative AI, parafictions. In the past year, one of whom was selected for New Contemporaries, who used AI to reconstitute pixelated faces from Google Street View in Russian suburbs. We have another student at the moment making hyper-realistic video vignettes of subway scenes based upon his childhood memories. Another has generated new Chinese mythological creatures instantiated in the real world and capable of holding conversations with viewers. I have PhD students working with AI, ones developing software tools specifically designed to make AI more accessible to artists. Another is making work designed to better understand the impact of AI on human labor and the ethics of care. So, all in all, we're seeing new forms, new approaches, new strategies, new aesthetics emerging from artists working with AI. And these kind of projects cut across several key areas that are really at the heart of how artists work with AI. Those include technology, criticality, and ethics. At the RCA, the technical services team is distinctive in that it's independent of any specific program at the college. Students in any discipline can study coding, they can work with future materials, they can experiment with digital fabrication, they can learn to program robots. And as I was saying earlier, these kinds of skill sets, putting these skills in the hands of artists are crucial in order for us to help students to understand how AI works and empower them to pursue interdisciplinary, innovative, and original approaches to using AI. We also have a number of individual programs that offer academic focus on AI. So that includes in the School of Communication, programs in digital directions and information experience design. In the School of Arts and Humanities, we have programs like photography, but also research clusters like Radical Matter, and also a forthcoming program in digital art. Over in the School of Architecture, there's a laboratory for design and machine learning as well. So the UK government recently published a white paper on AI that outlines 5 principles for responsible approaches to working with AI. And this is something that I think is really important as we kind of touch upon the ethical side of this. And it's something that really, I think, is at the core of what artists are doing when they work with AI. Those 5 principles that the government identified are safety, transparency, equity, governance, and contestability. So those, I think, are things that are a good representative of the kind of critical vocabularies that are being applied to what artists are often doing with AI these days. At the center of that is perhaps an understanding that public engagement is also central to building trust in AI. When people understand better the risks and the benefits of AI, and believe that these principles are being followed, it helps drive innovation and participation. Given we're all participating in AI systems already, no doubt whatever we're doing right now is somehow being processed, for instance. It only follows that we want to understand how our data is being used, and art can be an important vehicle for doing that. So the ways in which the RCA works with AI leaves artists uniquely placed to engage with these kinds of principles around equity and participation. So we're looking for students who want to simultaneously practice, explore, and critique AI in public spaces with an audience. So really what I'm saying is artists are expert at working with people publicly and dealing with problems of participation. when we think about the kind of places art finds itself, think about galleries or theaters or other cultural organizations, these are also spaces that are highly experienced at democratizing and demystifying complex social phenomena, in taking on ethically difficult, ambiguous, and sensitive subject matter, while at the same time imagining alternatives, new worlds, new narratives, new possibilities, and provoking meaningful discourse across any number of divides. In contemporary art today, more than ever before, things like safety, transparency, equity, contestability are at the core of the methodologies that artists are using. So through AI, we're looking to expand and enrich discussion around what those things mean today, using AI to help drive new models of governance with the potential to influence future policies and regulations in the field. And ultimately, our goal is to have these methods, standards, and best practices help contribute to a more robust and sophisticated critical discourse around art and AI, helping ensure artists will continue to engage with this ever-expanding field, push its boundaries, bring new ethical approaches, new challenges, new knowledge into view that can have value not just in art, but across multiple disciplines. So that's my introduction. We can pick up some questions around this later on in the hour. But now I want to hand over to Gregor for some more concrete examples. Gregor's an alumni of the RCA's photography program, and he graduated in 2023, but he's much more than that. So I'm going to let Gregor introduce himself properly. So I'll hand over to you now, Gregor. Thanks.
Sounds good. Thanks, James. Great. It's wild to see everyone being from so many countries. It's kind of, I didn't expect everyone to be from all around the world, but yeah, it's nice to be here. My name is Gregor. Was born in Slovakia. I was kind of grew up and raised in the UK, and I have a sort of a strange background how I got to where I am. So I just wanted to briefly touch on that because maybe it will provide a bit of a context to everything that I'll show as well from my work. But yeah, I initially studied philosophy and theology at Durham University. I sort of focused in my final year on philosophy of mind and metaphysics. So maybe that's where the sort of main interest in consciousness came from, and artificial consciousness as part of it. And then a couple of years later, I ended up at the RCA and I was in the Department of Photography. And yeah, I sort of dabbled in film, 16 millimeter film and analog media and digital. And it wasn't until I actually graduated from RCA that summer where things sort of took a turn, probably in a good way. But I'll show you as soon as I share my screen. Okay, can you see everything?
Perfect.
Perfect, awesome. So yeah, the first project I wanted to talk to you about is called Sincerely Victor Pike. It's kind of goes back a few years before because it's based on archival content. And essentially, I would say maybe how it came about. So around 2017, when I was at Durham, I was writing lots of essays, and I had a terrible memory, which later turned out to be sleep apnea. And they kind of said that part of it was you don't sleep properly, therefore your memories don't really get stored properly, and that was kind of the catalyst for this. But I didn't realize that until much later. I basically started to record lots of voice notes with my friends during breaks and like after university and in between lectures. And every time when somebody was saying something interesting, I was kind of just like, "Oh, do you mind if I record that? Because I kind of want to, go back to it, write about it." And to my surprise, people were kind of okay with it. So over time, this kind of habit of recording conversations and interviews and monologues sort of grew and grew and grew. And I ended up with an archive. It was 8 years later when I started to first dive in and try to figure out what's actually inside. And I think the first thing I realized was that this project wouldn't even happen without AI, not just generative AI, which is obviously the imagery, but also the entire workflow. What I mean by that is I had to implement, or I would say, as soon as I finished RCA, I went to New York on an artist residency, and I had an amazing curator visit, who kind of looked at this stack of papers that I had behind me, and he was like, "What are those?" And I was like, "Well, like I've been recording all this content over the years, and I found this AI transcription software that I've just been dragging and dropping all these recordings into." And he was like, "Okay, tell me more." And I was like, "Well, it's kind of like it spits out these transcripts of life, I called them." And he was kind of intrigued by this concept, and sort of encouraged me to explore that. But yeah, that's what I mean by the project wouldn't have existed if I didn't use the AI transcription in the first place, because the amount of the hundreds of hours of conversations was so overwhelming that I just didn't really want to like listen to everything. I would transcribe it, and then I would kind of read and get what's really happening in there. But from this process of excavating this audio archive, this film Sincerely Victor Pike was created. It's sort of like a diary or an anthology of short stories that people have told me over the years. And the audio is real, is documentary, if you like. And I was trying to figure out, like, how do you work with this? Like, do I film something and create the visuals for it? And eventually I sort of stumbled upon this TV show on Netflix, which I really, really loved, called Midnight Gospel. And it's kind of based on a podcast, which then the studio created animations to. And it was, it's kind of like fun and trippy and dissociative, because you had the real thing and there's fantasy thing. So I kind of wanted, that was the main inspiration for this piece as well. But instead of using animation, I decided to create the visuals to the audio stories using generative AI. And obviously it's kind of like a timepiece, because anything AI is almost like a timestamp of its time. This was made at the end of 2023. It ended up actually being a commission from the curator that I met at the residency. And yeah, since then, obviously, all the softwares, all the generative AI things that are sort of subscription based have gotten so much better. And yeah, that's what I mean. It kind of has like a dated quality. But I'll just play you like a little bit. I don't know if the sound is going to be working, but it's a little recording I made with a friend, Michael, in Brooklyn Park. Maybe just let me know if you can hear the sound. Recording live from Prospect Park on the 10th of September. What time is it? What time is it, babes? It's 7:40, so it's not even that late. And these bugs have been crazy. You said that you like the sound of bugs because
it's like a blanket. Like it's like really comforting. Because like when you're like the woods alone, it can be kind of like alienating and scary.
Yeah.
But when you listen to all the bugs, it's like so warm and comforting. And it just feels like, to me, it feels like I'm like a family gathering. And it's like all my crazy family members screaming.
You call it one big living room.
Yeah.
I like that. It's a nice reminder that like yeah, you're not alone, bitch.
Never alone. I feel like it's sad because the cities are so loud, they're so like disgusting, but they're really only loud because of cars. Like we're in the middle of Brooklyn right now. Just the only reason that you can hear the bugs is because there's no cars.
Okay, I assume you could hear the sound. Let me just double check. Was the sound okay?
Was all good, thanks.
Perfect. I'll go back to it. Perfect. So yeah, the sort of now when I'm even looking back with a bit of distance of time, I can sort of see the work for what it is a little bit more. I think because it was created with one of the early versions of the Gen AI that were kind of commercially or freely available. At the time, I used to run on Discord for free, unlimited as well. I sort of was going for this dreamlike, grainy, gritty quality. The first time I showed it, actually, the people that didn't watch the full thing but kind of just like peeked in, they thought it was archival footage because so much of it has almost like a 16mm grainy look to it. Yeah, that was maybe just a bit deceiving. But for me, because I'm not a creative technologist or a coder by profession, a lot of it was I was approaching it very like pictorially and just guided by the image and tried to create a story in that way. But there have been restrictions with that. So specifically at the time when this was made, the only output that was possible were always only 3 seconds long, which means that I was actually going for like a slow cinema. Initially I wanted this this kind of moody piece that is maybe non-linear and is very like slow moving, but I realized that was not possible because everything was only 3 seconds long. So it ended up just being like a bit of a jigsaw of these, slowed down clips. And I think second thing was that the prompting, I think that's when I sort of understood what working with AI partially means. And a lot of it has got to do with the prompts, where I think a lot of photo references and kind of maybe working with 16mm film and knowing those kind of camera actual, technical things came into play, because I assume a lot of the data that was pulled into these data sets had those references in there. But that was Sincerely Victor Pike. I'll briefly show you a second project I've worked on. This one is called Me Versus You, and it was a collaboration with a friend and artist, Adam Cole. This work was very different. It was, I'll play it in the background on the left-hand side so you can see it in real time. This work explores the complexities of intimacy by confronting the limits of AI vision systems. That's the fancy description. But really what this is about is using a software that was designed for distinguishing between people and sort of surveillance oriented, pulling people apart and figuring out who is who, and seeing what happens when you run it through an AI pipeline, and sort of understanding how these machine vision systems get a totally different understanding of what human entanglement actually means. So central to this work is a wrestling match between me and Adam that we recorded, which is then analyzed by the AI depth map, which you can see on the lower screen. As it was already said, yeah, this technology is designed for a lot of military purposes and surveillance. And the point of it is to separate the subjects, so that any close contact actually between these two figures, me and Adam, confuses the AI model. And then this depth map footage at the bottom, we fed through an AI pipeline, generative AI, in Stable Diffusion, and that we then get the image at the top, which you almost like cannot tell whether that is aggressive or actually sort of tender or romantic. As part of the exhibition, when we showed it on a few occasions, we also included the depth map print, which you can see on the left-hand side. Most recently, that was at the Tate Late in the Valentine's edition this February, which was a very special time because we were given the opportunity by the curators to show it next to Francis Bacon, specifically his triptychs, which depicts the wrestlers as well. You can see that in the lower left corner. But yeah, this is, I feel like, a very different type of implementing AI in any creative work. I feel like Sincerely Victor Pike is such a portrait of humanity, and it's very playful and dreamlike and kind of diaristic. And this feels a lot more critical, and it's just, showing or maybe bringing attention to how machines actually see, and how human approach is very, very different. And last two things I just want to quickly say, in addition to a lot of personal work that I'm doing, I try to do some commercial work whenever it comes my way, because I feel like it's like a playground to experiment with new stuff, or with whatever is available out there. And I think it kind of makes me realize as well where visual AI, or specifically video, whether it's text to video, image to video, video to video, how it can be used in fun different ways. So these were a series of visualizers for an artist, Douglas Dare, for his latest record, Omni. This one was specifically image to video, so it blends 60mm footage from the studio and then uses a snapshot that is later turned into an extension of that video, but through AI. And another commercial work, which is quite different. This is the latest one. It's for a band called Night Tapes. And this one actually uses the reverse process, and it's text to video. So all of this is actually AI, just amazingly blended and edited together by Owain. And yeah, the brief for this was kind of wild, because it was, she turns into a younger version of herself, and then into water, and then into a fractal, and it was everything, everything and nothing at the same time. So it was like a fun challenge to figure out how to pull off. But yeah, that's kind of what I do. I'm gonna go back now and stop sharing.
Great. So thank you so much, Gregor, and thank you so much, James, for your introduction and for sharing your work. Actually, we received lots of comments and say this is great. Thanks for sharing. Well, as promised, now we are ready to answer some of the questions. And I don't know, James, if you wanted to add on anything before we move into the Q&A, or ready to take some questions.
No. Well, thanks, Gregor. That was great. And I think that gives us some really useful framework as well for seeing what kinds of stuff, artists can produce with AI. And it's a really good lens as well, because you're working with a lot of kind of consumer software kind of things that almost anyone can have a go at. And it's interesting to try and deal with the limitations of that software as well. Like you're saying, if it only can generate a couple of seconds of video, then you sort of innovate by working really slowly and playing around that way. So I think these are the kinds of aesthetic experiments that artists can do to really kind of stretch those platforms. There's some good questions on here
Yes.
as well. Which maybe we could sort of dip into. I quite like the one about
Sure, pick the one that you want. We try to go
Yeah.
through as many as we can. I'm here to moderate, but if there is something that you spot, James, absolutely. Let's start with the
Yeah, I like the one about can AI make an artwork starting from a blank canvas like painters? I think that's kind of an interesting question, because, do painters start with a blank canvas? That's maybe a good provocation. Like Gregor is working in the Me and You project. Are you starting from a blank canvas? Do you know anything before that? Francis Bacon have anything to say about that blank canvas?
Yeah, do you know what? Like, so the Francis Bacon thing actually happened after we made it, but obviously I knew the reference, but it wasn't quite in the picture at the time when we were making it. I think that one is different, I would say, because it's neither image to video nor is it text to video. That one was actually a video to video. We used ourselves to put ourselves in the work, and everything that is the final outcome is still us. It's just passed through a process, which is the AI, if you like. I feel like Adam should be here because he's a lot more techie than I am, but I would say it feels like a scale, isn't it? It's like, I feel like anything with a heavy data set that you don't have access to is very different to when you use like your own content and your own footage. I mean, the actual bodies that you can kind of see that, orange and stuff, what we did with that, we took loads of pictures of our skin and body parts and then put that into the pipeline. So any textures that you see, any color that you see in those bodies is actually trained on our own, bodies and skin types and all that stuff. So I feel like with that one, again, on that scale of, blank canvas, I feel like it's maybe a little bit blanker, if you like. But I totally understand that, anything that is used or like that is created using commercial data sets that you don't have any access to and you don't know where they come from, I feel like that's where the question is a lot more appropriate, I think. And then I feel like it becomes a lot more about, I feel like certain looks from the AI are only almost harnessed if you understand the references that they are tagged with, almost to bring them back from this like mysterious archive, right? So I don't know whether that makes it any exclusive, but it definitely, using specific references for that is kind of helpful. I feel like I kind of dodged the question a little bit.
I guess I was just thinking about, when you have a blank canvas where you start, like you're drawing on like personal archives, almost like a personal data set in order to fill that canvas. And that's quite analogous to the way that the AI is working in many ways, right? It kind of
Mhm.
starts with noise and then if turns that noise into something that is recognizable based on what it's been trained on. So, we can see some analogies there, which are kind of interesting, actually, from a creative point of view.
Another question that we receive is regarding an IT student passionate about graphic design, if it's necessary to learn foundational topics like art theory or AI to become a better design. So how the artificial intelligence can actually support someone who is passionate about graphic design to become an even better artist.
I think one interesting thing about AI is how interdisciplinary it is and how supportive of that. It offers opportunities for inroads to it from a broad range of disciplines, whereas architecture, graphic design, fine art, etc. And in terms of how helpful it is to know things about those other disciplines in order to kind of populate that knowledge and innovation, obviously it helps. Yeah, the more you can borrow methodologies from other disciplines, the more it will support your ability to innovate within any other discipline. So yes, I guess is a simple answer to that.
Another one is regarding at what point in its evolution do you think AI will or should be given authorship or credit?
Good one.
Interesting.
Greg, what do you think, Gregor?
Ooh, that was a hefty one. What was it? What was the question? At what point in the evolution of AI?
Do we think that we should or it will be given authorship or credit?
Yeah. I feel like that one is like so heavily philosophical, right? Because it comes down to at what point does it get any sort of credible consciousness, which is, I feel like a heated topic. I feel like I immediately think to that. Do you remember that Google, one of the Google engineers or employees who kind of came out publicly advocating that the one that they were running as part of their training was like equivalent to a 7-year-old child or something similar. Um, yeah, I don't know if it's a tough one, but the way I can maybe I'll just speak for myself. I think it's a collaboration. At least that's the way I try to think about it, because sometimes when I'm stuck, it sort of unlocks something, and then at the same time, it's totally frozen or perhaps directionless, or maybe whichever direction it comes up with is sometimes like so random that it has no real use. So it kind of for me goes both ways. It's sort of like a push and pull. I mean, what I learned from the first project, Sincerely Victor Pike, I mean, actually all of them, is like it never quite goes where you want it to go, you know, and it's well, it could be both frustrating, but at the same time, you're kind of like, oh, I could not see that coming ever. So I guess that's kind of cool. Um, but could it get full authorship? I think legally right now, I was told that anything that AI is made is non-copyrightable. I don't know if that is true, but um, which I guess isn't a bad news for me. But should it be given any sort of authorship? Maybe co-authorship, but not full authorship, I'll say.
Mm.
James?
Yeah, it is an interesting one, and maybe part of it is a kind of ego question too. Where as artists we make our work and want to claim credit for it, but it does require a greater acknowledgement of the kind of collaborative process that's involved. So should we give AI itself the authorial credit? I don't think so. I don't think that AI is particularly full of ideas. It borrows them, it generates them from its data set. And I think Ada Lovelace once said, a computer can never come up with a new idea on its own, right? It's only the sum of whatever it's able to work with. So, people may have arguments with that about emergent intelligence and so on and so forth. I don't think we're quite there yet, but for now, it's offering an interesting challenge to artistic or current models of artistic authorship, which, as I said before, are a challenge and a problem, but they're not necessarily the biggest problem. I think that maybe forces us to work around that and to come up with new ways of thinking about authorship, which can be themselves a form of innovation.
I think, Gregor, there was a question that you wanted to answer regarding big wins and big challenges for you in working with AI. I
What
saw
was
that
the
you
big?
I saw you click like I want to answer. What were the big wins and big
Oh,
challenges for
oh,
you
oh
in
my God.
working with AI?
I was actually
Maybe.
trying to figure out how it works, but I'll answer it. I was just like, what's going on? It said like you can answer live, and I was like, ooh, what's
Yeah.
this? Big challenges and big wins. I mean, the big win, I think I love the unpredictability of it. I mean, as somebody severely ADHD, it's really stimulating, because it kind of always proposes something that you don't really see coming, and then you have to be agile and then work around that. I feel like it depends again on the workflow. Sometimes on if it's like an image to video and you have to like, you have a starting thing and you have to put something, at the end. It's that is the fun bit because you never know what's the next thing. But I think the challenge is, I mean, there's so many. I mean, so much AI is just cringy and is kind of horrible looking and plastic, and I think a lot of it is going to age really badly as well. So I think I'm just being very like, I try to be quite tiptoey about what I put out there because I don't really want to, I don't, I don't necessarily just want to like jump on the bandwagon and like produce all this like fun stuff and like all the, I don't know, because I think you can create anything. I mean, I open my Instagram, I've got like a secret Instagram thing, which is just for AI when I see like what people are making, and it's everything and nothing at the same time. So yeah, I just try to always think like, how can I wheel this back into something a bit more real life, or like talk about the real thing, or like, real emotion and stuff. Because I don't know, that's just what I connect to. So I try not to do the other thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and that connects quite strongly back to what I said earlier about the trite nature of a lot of AI art. If it's just following the technology, if it's just like, hey, we can do this, then that's not really enough, and it's not going to stand the test of time. Certainly, the history of digital art is full of stuff that looks dated, but if it's managed to actually, have something conceptually interesting that it's exploring at the same time, then
Yeah.
it's right.
Yeah, or it's like so new that it like opens everyone's mind to something. But I feel like that's always like rare. I know I agree with what you said. Yeah.
Again, if you spot any question, let me know. There was one like, will the traditional oil painters lose their appeal? So what's going to happen with artificial intelligence? Are they going to be replaced? Some artists, some roles?
I mean, that's lose their appeal. I don't know. It depends what is the appeal of oil painters, I suppose. There's my experience in working with sort of digital art over a fairly long time now, and also thinking about how you teach that kind of stuff in universities, is that it is a constant process of renewal. And there's something about being an artist that requires that, reinvention when you're working with new media. So, what might it mean to be an oil painter in 2025, right? To what extent is that something that is actually in dialogue with AI? To make that decision to paint with oils. You could argue that's kind of a form of AI art, maybe even, right? Just like as Jesse Darling, said, everyone today is a post-internet artist. No matter what you're doing, your work's in dialogue with the internet. And we might say the same thing. Maybe it's the ultimate AI art to refuse to do anything but paint in oils at home, and that is a response to it. And maybe that's how we might interpret it. You could also see, the huge amount of oil paintings that are being produced based on AI images, right? Which are being painted to order, or photographs to oil. There's lots of innovative ways to work with oil that maybe incorporate AI into the workflow. And maybe if you're committed to that as your medium, you want to think about those things, either as a form of resistance or as a form of complicity somehow. So I think there's always a lot there.
While I'll give you time if you want to scroll through the question, Gregor, they're asking us if you can share, for example, link to your website or to your recent work, because they were kind of curious to have a look at what you shared. So even if it's just a link where they can find more about your works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm just pasting it in the chat as well. Cool.
Perfect. So lots of different questions, but James and Gregory, if you spot anything, meantime, I'm just going to copy.
Some of these are so good. I just I want to get a transcript of it and think about them afterwards. I mean, this one is just something that kind of maybe hits home a little. It says, as an artist who has embraced AI, what worries you whilst using it? Sometimes I worry about dependency and its long-term effect on my creative thinking. Just because I kind of get it. I mean, I get it mostly because I feel like not just generative AI, but like ChatGPT, I feel like I use it for so much now. If I have a cabbage, a tomato, and a carrot, I'm just like, what can you make out of
What can you make?
just like anything? Or like, you paste it and it just does it for you. So I've also heard that people use it for therapy now, which is kind of wild, right? But when it comes to like generative AI specifically, I mean, it depends like what angle I'm looking at it. In terms of just like the output, I'm wondering whether if people sort of don't go down the traditional route and try to do research from books and look at references and things like that, but maybe that's just like a wider post-internet situation, there's so many references and things that kind of get lost or are not, uploaded and sort of are unexcavated. So maybe that's the worry. But in terms of dependency on what how did it go again? Like dependency on creative thinking. There's definitely like do you know what's strange? That process when you like type in the prompt and like with a lot of these commercial ones, you sort of have to wait for let's say 3 minutes before you get the output. So there's a period of waiting that I find kind of jarring because whilst in other form of art making, you would like you're painting, you kind of stand by, you look at it, you think about it. With this, there is so much waiting and waiting for the next thing that it kind of always feels endless, that you always have an indefinite amount of things that you can generate. So for me there is a problem of like the lack of closure at all times. You can always do more and you can always generate more, and it's just like at what point do you decide that this is good enough? I, Again, maybe I'm staring off the thing, but there's a certain like level of losing a boundary and grip on working with this medium that I think maybe just like not just critical thinking but like discipline and kind of decision making, which I find quite difficult with it. Yeah.
Well, it's like versioning as well, right? Which is very much a kind of feature, I suppose, of post-internet kind of digital practices, and AI very much fits into that. What you've got is just one version. You could make all sorts of variations on it. Is it the
Mhm.
same piece of work? Is it a different piece of work? That kind of closure is an interesting one, yeah.
James, I saw that you bias in AI generated art into really bad, or can it reflect useful cultural or aesthetic tendencies worth exploring?
Yeah, I think it's a good one. Question of bias in relation to AI. So, obviously this kind of comes in as well into the conversation around kind of consumer level platforms that we're working with, which have been trained, a huge expense, huge amount of time involved in doing it. But what's in it? When we ask it a question, we give it a prompt, what comes back is going to be culturally inflected, biased. It's going to be oriented towards whatever the nature of the training data is that's in there, and that may not be an equitable distribution of knowledge or information. So the problem of bias is something that has been, tackled by a number of artists working with AI, thinking also of, you know, people like Joy Buolamwini making videos, documentaries. Coded Bias was the name of hers, around the fact that as an African American, her face wasn't being recognized by facial recognition systems, um, because the training data was biased, right? So, as an artist, I think often, we're kind of wrestling with this question: is it better to make something visible, or is it better to try and create our own version, our own system? And I think that's an interesting one. When I collaborate often with computer scientists, they'll assume that what we want is an AI model for artists that makes art, right? Whereas in fact, what we probably want more of is access to the existing ones that are kind of messed up so that we can make visible these biases. If we create our own and we remove that bias, what's that mean? We're creating like a utopian version of the world in which those biases don't exist. So it's an interesting kind of wrestle, if you like. So coming back to that question, is it inherently bad? Yes, but can it reflect useful cultural or aesthetic tendencies worth exploring? Absolutely. And that's kind of the error, if you like, and maybe this comes back to some of what you're doing, Gregor, in the works you shared, is actually the most powerful thing. Where we see that error, we start seeing maybe a bit more of the human, we see a bit more of the critique, of the criticality, of the vocabulary of AI. And that's kind of often what we're looking to make visible, right?
Absolutely. There was also a comment in here to say, do you think, for example, AI will make contemporary art more inclusive to everyone? So, for example, when it comes to the tools and platform to manifest creativities into tangible products.
I think it's a yes or a no, it does both, right? Because obviously there are numerous kind of inequities inherent in AI, just in terms of things like access, the kind of climate footprint, the kind of bias in place. But yeah, it is something that allows you to work quite quickly. And if you can access the technology, it can be very effective at the same time and gives you a means to engage with technology and society in a very constructive, fashion. So that's powerful.
There's still a paywall though, yeah, exactly. It depends on like exactly what your means are, and maybe it's also just quite overwhelming with because it's changing every 2 weeks. There's something new that's come up, so there's definitely also like keeping up with this ongoing, ever-changing landscape of AI. Because I feel like you use one thing, and then by the end of the project, it's already outdated, and something else is going a thing. But I would say that what I'm noticing as well is like everything is suddenly turning back into the subscription model. It started a lot of these, for instance, P collabs. A lot of them started on Discord for free, unlimited, and then as soon as the models develop into something commercially usable, it's suddenly put behind a paywall. So that's just something that I've been noticing.
Mhm.
Lots of very interesting questions. I'm going through to see which one, but again, if you spot something,
I'm looking at the question which I don't want to answer, but I feel like it's important to bring it up. It's the one like, are you concerned with the environmental impact of AI, which is a huge one, and it's definitely something that I feel like it's like self-imposed now because luckily no one's asked me that, but it's just something that I'm constantly trying to figure out, and I don't I don't know if I've got an answer for it. I mean, something like offsetting carbon is definitely like on the table, but whether that is actually an effective method for I don't even know how you like quantify the amount of the amount that you've consumed making a project. Like how do you put a finger on what are you actually grappling with when it's all somewhere out there in the cloud? So yeah, I don't know. I'm just curious, James, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. Like the environmental impact of just what any of us are doing with AI is terrible. And the how do you wrestle that as an artist? Comes back to what I just said, really, do you try and opt out of that and say, hey, I'm not participating in this as a form of protest against that? Do you work with it in order to make it visible and to communicate and share that impact? I guess a middle road is to try and develop a more sustainable set of tools for working with AI, right? And part of this then comes back to that question of what skills do you need as an artist in order to actually be effective within this space? Because if all we're doing is consuming, then we don't have enough control to come up with alternatives or to really understand the technology sufficiently in order to share its impact. So that's where this kind of training, learning becomes a form of empowerment for artists to then use their platforms to share that in order to make people more aware of it and maybe try and pressure the corporations that do have control of that to adopt alternative approaches. And so then we shift the AI narrative accordingly. So what that means, I guess, is artists making projects using AI, which are about a critique of the environmental impact of AI. And that's a kind of powerful space to be in, and one that I suppose most corporate applications of AI are, as you say, ignoring, you know. So that's one role that artists can play that's very important.
Another question is regarding relationship between art and reality. So, for example, to say, I love the way you, Gregor, use a real story, a real conversation, and convert it to art. What's your vision about the relationship between reality and art?
Oh my gosh, that's wide. Reality and art. Well, I feel like even without working in the medium or with the medium, there is a confusing amount how much I'm like involved in already a different reality, right? I feel like, you know, that thing when your phone like pings and it tells you that you've been online, or like not online, on your phone for like 6 hours straight or something. I feel like that's kind of like touching on the subject already, that like, you know, you're already like sort of involved in something so elusive and somewhere where like time slips. But in terms of the art and reality, is that the question? Art and reality?
It
Yeah.
is, yes.
I mean, the way I try to use it is, as James was saying, like try to be a bit more critical about it, or try to make a hybrid work where it's kind of in conversation with each other. Because at least right now, I don't think it's time for total escapism. Maybe that's why I don't like just the purely sort of nonsensical works videos. You know, that kind of just like is like a dancing cat, but it also looks like a humanoid, and it's like, what are we doing? You know, I feel like if we, at the end of the day, you know, you wake up, you have a family, you have friends, you kind of want to stay a bit more grounded, or at least I do. So um, I don't know. I always try to make work at least like about vaguely real things that have some sort of connection to the real life. Yeah.
Another question, and is also like we wanted to focus everything, of course, on AI and the impact, but they asking what's the role of RCA? So maybe James can help us. So, for example, in supporting artists in learning how to use artificial intelligence during their studies or their period at RCA.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned earlier, the RCA's technical services is kind of unusual, I would say, in that you don't have the technicians tied to individual programs. So we have creative coding technicians who any student in the college can go spend some time with, do a consultation, do workshops, have one-on-one kind of opportunities to develop projects. So I think we, you know, from a kind of tuition kind of point of view, there's that, the individual programs that you're in, maybe it's a PhD program, in which case your advisors may be, you know, or to be people who obviously are academically oriented towards problems with AI. Infrastructure, I think, is an interesting one. Like the RCA, it's an art school, so it's got no business having like a computer science program, but it does. And so, you know, the sorts of infrastructure that's in place is emerging through, you know, resources like that. But also, as Gregor said, you know, increasingly AI infrastructure is in the cloud. It's not a physical thing. And this is something that maybe helps the RCA in that we don't have to invest in huge amounts of compute in a building somewhere in order to be able to be part of that conversation. Collaborations with other universities like Imperial College are also important there, but also international collaborations with cloud service providers help provide some of that infrastructure, and that's something that's kind of actively happening at the RCA, particularly through things like developing new programs in digital art, for instance. So it's there, and like I said at the top of the hour, it's absolutely crucial that artists are part of that conversation and have the resources in order to be able to participate in it. Because if that doesn't happen, things will run away from us quickly, and we won't have artists part of that conversation that they need to be inside of.
Just linking to this because there is an upcoming online Q&A week next week. So I'm just going to post a link that you can register, and of course we're going to follow up via email so you can join the conversation and find out more about specific courses at RCA. We still have time for a couple of questions. I know that we received lots of questions, and I also want to make sure that I can pass them on to you, James and Gregor, after the webinar. So if you spot anything, we still have time to go through a couple of them. And I also wanted to thank all of you connected, because lots of students connected and lots of very much interesting questions, which was great. It is something that probably could discuss for hours, and we know it was a very interesting topic. But yes, James, Gregor, anything that you want to add, or maybe a specific question that you think could be worth it to read? Because I see loads, but
Yeah,
There's so many good ones. I can't decide. There's one about like intention in creativity and how can AI have intention in any meaningful sense. That's an interesting thing because it kind of touches on, when you see an output that is just for its own sake, where does it lead to? It was actually like this week that I had a conversation with ChatGPT about like I'm basically working on a different project as well, on a Polaroid project, and I asked it if it wants me to document something in the real world and bring it back, what would it want me to depict, something that it cannot grasp, And it told me, and I kind of also said like try to forget about the fact that you have coders and people that coded you for a specific answer. And it said, okay, I'm going to try to do this. If you were to bring something back, I would like it to be something that is imperfect, something that is in decay. And I was like, why is that? And it was just like, well, because I only live in language, and humans are defined by that which passes. Everything that is meaningful to humans is that which flourishes and dies eventually. And I was just sat there like, oh my God, this is I understand it's just a large language model, but there was something really profound that kind of hit like, oh my God, like is kind of right. Like in a sense, that's also what I'm interested in, like those elusive things that will not be here forever, which obviously touches our emotions and our sort of, I don't know, more human side. That is kind of what matters. And that's maybe where the intention in the work should be as well. Kind of, again, comes back to like talking about real stuff that matter to you. So I feel like AI as such, it can work with whatever you give it, but I don't think it will ever have like an intention unless you ask it,
But yeah, it generated a question for you, which
What? Which one? Where is it?
no, I mean,
no, like AI.
Oh, I see. Sorry, I thought like
conversation.
somebody typed it into ChatGPT, like generate a question.
I mean, like it's it's almost like asking deep philosophical questions about its own existence.
Mhm.
We're not believing that that's necessarily an intention. It's rather something that's learned, but
Mhm.
it's maybe it passes the Turing test. It's
Mhm.
convincing enough, right?
Yeah.
There's a question in here about uh, you know, AI making art for the consumption of other AI. So AI making art for itself, and what that would look like, which is kind of interesting. There's a very, I guess, anthropic eccentric sort of arrogance maybe implicit in a lot of this, where we're sort of assuming that we are the ones who have some kind of hierarchical importance, and we're the people who get to decide if it's any good or not, right?
Mhm.
But what happens if an AI is allowed? What would art be to AI? How would that manifest itself? What would it look like? What would it be? What would be the threshold for it? Would we understand it? Would it be too sophisticated for us? Those
Yeah.
kind of questions start
That is a
getting.
good question. I love how like circular it becomes when you start thinking about it. I mean, it's actually, I mean, you could just test it out if because ChatGPT can now have an output through DALI. So it can give you an image and you can feed it back if you want. So, I mean, if anyone does this, I'm kind of curious to see what happens. I've seen people asking it to create memes, which kind of surprised me that like that is something that it's capable of at this point and create like, not just simple memes, but actually like contextual, referential memes. But God, I don't have an answer to that. I yap a lot, but I don't have an answer to this one. What do you think? What would an artwork created by AI for AI look like?
Well, I guess by its nature, we would never know, right? We would never understand it. It does make me think of the Donald Cammell film Demon Seed. I don't know if you ever seen that, but there's like a supercomputer. It finds a cure for cancer in 4 days, and then invades Julie Christie's fully automated home and starts trying to build a body for itself so that it can experience the real world, and have those kind of direct experiences. And the last scene of the film, there's a baby's born and it wakes up and it has the computer's voice. So that's
Oh,
just
damn.
thinking about like the quality of experience and how we participate in things like art, what senses we have available to do that. You might think that, that is maybe the pathway to it. Why would art be in a gallery for an AI rather than in a network or inside a machine or a place that we could never go in order to actually experience it? So that becomes maybe the relationship between senses and ethics become part of this conversation as well that way.
No, absolutely. And there is also a few questions about the ethics of AI, and also James trying to summarize this when in his first presentation. Well, I know that we still have lots of questions, and I think that Gregor and James did a great job trying to answer some of them. We'll make sure to share this with you, so we believe they could be also useful for you. And I really want to thank you for your contribution, but also for whoever participated into this live webinar, because it was great to see so many students connected from all over the world, and also to see all of your interests and questions. So we really hope that it was a useful question. We know that with this sort of topic, we probably would need more series of this. So let's think about, maybe we can do a second live event on AI, because there is a lot to discuss, and I'm sure that in maybe, I don't know, like even few months, probably there will be some news, some new tools that have been created. But one thing that I want to make sure is to inform you that we're going to follow up via email. The session has been recorded, so we're going to share the recording of the event and an email address that you can reach out in case you have any further question. And as mentioned, RCA, there is an online Q&A week next week. James will be presenting. So in case you have more specific question regarding RCA programs, that can definitely be the right place. So James, Gregor, is there anything that you'd like to add before we say goodbye for today?
I think just, yeah, amazing questions. It just shows us what a generative area this really is, and how important it is for artists and everybody who's in the chat here to participate in. There's so many rich ideas, really exciting, and hoping to see many of them come into fruition one way or another.
Great. So
Yeah, likewise. I mean, there's so many good questions. I'm like desperately trying to answer all of them. But yeah, this was super fun. I mean, I would just say that it still feels like such early days of this whole thing. And, I feel like that there may be like this sentiment like, oh, am I too late to understand this or join this thing? I think it's like such early days that all these questions are just important. But anyone who's interested in making stuff should just definitely go for it.
Right. And as you all showed us, I think RCA is probably one of the best places to try this. So thank you so much. Thank you so much, James and Gregor, for your contribution, and to everyone who attended the event. And we look forward to seeing you soon at the next live session. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Bye.